There we go. Hey, everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to this week's live chat. I accidentally muted myself instead of unmuting. So glad you're here. Looking forward to spending today giving you some sneak peeks and sharing a little peek into my process when it comes to designing quilt patterns. Whenever I do these live chats, I don't want to just sit here and talk. I wanted to give some kind of teachable moment, but man, right now our whole world is kind of consumed with our upcoming quilt walk and the pattern and the quilt that we make with it. And I thought, well, let's just lean into it. Let's just talk a little bit about how that process comes together. So a little different than normal, but hopefully still intriguing. As always, Jessica's here behind the camera. She'll be monitoring the chat. If you have any questions, you can type them in the comments and she'll give them to me at the end. If you're not watching live, no worries. You can type them in the comments and I get on there from time to time. So before we do that though, before I show a little bit of peek in my process, I have a sneak peek. So last week during live chat, people were saying, show us a sneak peek of the upcoming Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along, the video series that I do. And literally today, probably about an hour ago, we got the fabric for the coordinating prints. So I'm going to show you those and the border. So here's the coordinating prints for the new challenge, very much inspired by quilting. A lot more purple than you're probably used to seeing and a lot of fun colors there. So I'll have a better picture of it when the challenge actually starts, but those will be the coordinating prints. So the panel is going to have a lot of these colors in it. So very, very excited about that. I'm going to have to cut it down though, because that's a big stack of fabric, but I love them. They're so fun. I've already got the panel designed. I've already got the borders designed. We're just kind of trying to get through this next step, but I am so in love with the border panel. So I'm going to give you that. I'll show you what that looks like. Look at that. So it's like its little applique and it's the actual prints that are in the coordinating fabric. So I'll show you the panel eventually, but this is going to be the optional border. But isn't that cute? I'm super excited about that. I think it's going to be fun. And this has nothing to do with anything, but I also at the same time got this panel that I designed for my thread painting class. How cute is that? I just thought it would be fun. So I can't wait to go home and work on it. It'll be the class sample for that thread painting class. So you'll probably see that in an upcoming video sometime. It'll be around. So lots of stuff going on around here. If you hear any thunks or bumps, that's because they are setting up the long arms in our new long arm education center. And so I told him to be quiet, but my husband was just like, girl, bye. So I don't know if that means he'll be quiet or not. Today's live chat might not be quite as long as normal. My daughter is heading home from college, so I'm excited to see her. Just a lot going on right now. Lots of fun, lots of fun. Anyway, if you have watched any of the previous live chats, you know that I've been talking a lot about our quilt walk that's coming up, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about that. But when I was kind of wrapping my mind around like, okay, what am I going to talk about and gathering the pictures, it kind of reminded me of this joke that my son likes to play on me. So if I tell him something that he didn't really care about, he'll say, who? And then when I start to answer it, he'll go, asked. Who asked? So I kind of thought this is kind of like this live chat. Nobody asked me what my process was like, but you're just going to find out. Another thing he likes to do is clap if you care. So sometimes we'll do that, but he's sweet. He's just giving me a hard time. Anyway, so designing the pattern for the quilt walk is kind of this big, hairy kind of thing. I'll tell you why here in a second. But what's funny to me is sometimes when I stop and think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I actually write quilt patterns. I'm not a numbers gal. That's not my strength. Not that I'm good at math. I think I'm like number dyslexic, if that's a thing. The numbers come in and they leave right away. But when I started designing fabric for art gallery quilts and Robert Kaufman back in the day, we had to design free patterns to promote our fabric collection. And so that was my first tiptoe into designing patterns and actually writing the pattern. And I didn't charge for a quilt pattern for a long time because my theory was if it was free and if I made a mistake, nobody can be too mad at me. But since then, we've started our block of the month Build a Quilt here at the shop. I write all the patterns for that. And then when we started the Quilt Walk, which this will be our 6th one, we decided to write the pattern for that as well. So now I get plenty of experience writing patterns and I actually really kind of enjoy it. It works, I think, a different side of my brain than quilting. So sometimes when I just want to take a break from the long arm, I'll sit at the computer. It's just a nice compliment. I like to, kind of jump back and forth between the two. So when I thought I would kind of show a little bit how that works, I pulled together some pictures and we can just have fun with it. If you have any questions, you can definitely let me know. All right, so hold on one second. Oh, that's bad. One second. Sorry, guys. I forgot to set up my camera. Just bear with me. Just bear with me. It's great. It's great. There we go. We were filling Build-A-Quilt orders right before, and I told Jessica when we sat down, I was like, oh my gosh, is your brain hurt? We're just kind of ping-ponging all over the place. So there we go. Now you can see me and not just a teal box. So on June 8th is our 6th annual Quilt Walk, and it's like I said, it's like our big event of the year. It's definitely the one that uses the most manpower. Everybody kind of chips in. Jessica's husband helps, my husband helps, our kids help. It's like really difficult to know me because you usually get wrapped into doing something. So what we do is we kind of like introduce quilters to our downtown area. And I know some of you already heard this, but you come to the quilt shop, you get a little map, and you walk around and collect the pieces to this pattern. This wonderful pattern that hasn't been designed yet. When we picked the date of Quilt Walk and I'm, talking about it, people are like, oh, I can't wait to see it. And I'm like, yeah, I can't wait either. I need to get it done. So it is finished. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about that. Jenny Doan is our featured speaker this year. I know you've kind of already heard that a million times. I'm super stoked, super excited to hear her story and get to hang out with her. Man, there we go. Sorry, guys. So this is what the map looks like. And so if you were to participate in Quilt Walk, and I know not everybody can because, it's just busy and not everybody lives in the Kansas City area, but this is the map that you would get from our quilt shop, and then you'd go to the little stops and you'd collect the pieces to the pattern. So right off the bat, I have to have a pattern that can be broken into at least 12 pieces, and it has to be interesting and unique and good enough that you'll make you want to come. So when I sat down and kind of like first started doing the Quilt Walk, the patterns have evolved over the years. So I thought, let's pull out some of the previous Quilt Walk patterns and kind of see how it's evolved over the years. So the very first Quilt Walk, I know it's not a great picture. Like I was just trying to find anything I could find. This was the walkabout quilt pattern. And I was kind of imagining the downtown Liberty Square, which is where our shop is located, and kind of using that as inspiration. And I even, had the 2018 put in the bottom if you could see it down there. So that was the first Quilt Walk pattern. And not too bad, right? Like it's got to be broken into pieces and still be interesting. I think what's interesting about any creative endeavor is the more you do it, the more your style evolves. I mean, even as quilters, we're that way, right? I think back to the very first quilt I ever made, and I'm like, I can't believe I made that. I've changed so much, and writing patterns and designing is no different. So this was the very first one. Quilt Walk went smashingly well, and so it's been going ever since. So for the second Quilt Walk, this was the pattern. Definitely a little bit of a different vibe. Still the idea of the square, and you can see the little buildings and some sewing themed blocks in there. And this one was pretty fun to put together. So the second Quilt Walk, went really good. And so at this point, I'm realizing like, okay, it's going to be a thing. I guess I'm going to get practice at writing these patterns. But I want them each to be different. I think mostly because I just get bored doing the same thing over and over again. So I always try to make it different from the last one. So after that, then we had, here's some detailed pictures of the actual quilt itself. I quilted it, but I can't find pictures of it anywhere. And I was too lazy to go find the quilt and take a picture of it. But the quilting looked really good, so we'll just go with that. But when I'm like trying to think of the blocks that I'm going to design, I want them to be not difficult because I don't want anybody to hate me while they're making this quilt, but I do want it to be interesting and have a cool layout. So I kind of liked how that turned out. All right, so then came Stroll. So there's actually a 2-year break in here because of, COVID hit, and so we skipped 2020. And when the downtown Liberty wanted to put on the Quilt Walk, I think we had like a couple months notice. It was a last minute kind of thing for sure. So this one was the Saturday Stroll quilt pattern. Again, you can kind of see the blocks and the different layout. And then for some reason, I get these ideas in my head. It's like if I have any time left, I try to cram another project in. I thought, you know what, let's do it in 2 color options. Let's do the rainbow version too. So I have a lot of help from my friends, especially Irene, who pieced most of these quilts here. And so we made 2 versions of that. I'll never do that again. It was too much of a pain, and the fabrics didn't correlate. So it wasn't like fabric A was the same over here. So if you see them next to each other, you can tell there's totally different colors. So I basically had to rewrite the pattern or rework it. So I'm not going to do that again. So when you try stuff, you learn, right? You learn what to do next time and what not to do next time. So then comes Tula Pink. When she was our featured guest, that was probably definitely our most well-attended quilt walk up to that point. And so if I am having Tula Pink here, I need to use her fabric. And so this was the Parade quilt, using her fabric. Totally different colors for me, totally kind of outside my comfort zone. In fact, I designed the pattern with the blocks and I wanted a different layout, really. I was kind of, all right, we've seen the square, let's do something different here. But I got about halfway through this and I remember calling Irene and being like, can you just put the fabrics in for me? I don't know where to put them. I love picking threads for quilts and I love piecing, but I'm not the best at picking fabric colors. If it has more than like 3 colors, it just starts hurting my head. And so thankfully I have good friends that kind of come along and help with that. So totally different look, totally different pattern, but just a fun option there. And you can kind of see some detail of it. It's so interesting, and we're going to see here in a second how different a quilt looks when it's on the computer versus fabric itself. It's really hard sometimes to imagine, those colors a certain way. So it was really fun when it comes out and you see it and it looks good. So I was really, really pleased with how that turned out. Then last year we had this one, Town Square. I'm like, what is it? Totally different color options here. I wanted it to be a little bit jewel toned or more jewel toned. I decided to take the blocks and put them around the border with some, kind of log cabin blocks. So just a fun option right there. Now, up to this point, though, I have to be honest with you, I have not pieced a single Quilt Walk quilt. I'm kind of the opposite of most quilters. I pay people to piece and bind for me so that I can quilt it. And so Irene has pieced most of these. Joni has pieced some. So it's always fun to write the pattern, but I don't necessarily have to make it. So I can say something like repeat to make 16 of these teeny log cabin blocks. Although it was pretty funny, I was sewing with one of my friends, Becca, and she was making this quilt at our little retreat. And she kept saying, really, Angela, really? That many 1.5-inch squares? I'm like, hey, I don't shoot the messenger or the pattern writer. So again, it's just kind of fun to kind of stretch my wings and do some different stuff there. So then you can kind of see the fabric there. I just pulled a picture so you could see the pretty jewel tones. As I work through these quilts and look through these pictures, I'm realizing that purple is really starting to like insert itself into my life. I don't love it much more than I used to, but I don't hate it as much. So anyway, definitely some purple. So there you can see the 5 Quilt Walk quilts in all their beautiful glory, all different, all unique. And then, so when I sat down to, really work through this year's quilt pattern, again, I want blocks that aren't super difficult, but that are interesting, right? It's like, I want the best of both worlds there. It has to be broken up into 12 blocks, and it's for the Quilt Walk that, Jenny Doan is going to be at. So it has to be great. And so after countless hours, I came up with In Bloom. So when I'm designing the pattern, I wish I would have taken some progress, like snapshots of the process. But when I'm coming up with the quilt pattern, I'm kind of designing the layout and the blocks at the same time. I like to kind of toggle between the two as I get stuck on one or the other. I will say that I actually pieced this. So for the first time, I can say that I pieced the quilt, and you can probably tell I pieced it because there is a piecing error. I'm not going to point it out to you, but I did not notice it until I was working on this live chat. It's quilted, it's hung, it's bound, it's photographed, and I'm like, oh man, well, what are you going to do? The pattern's right, so that's all that matters. So anyway, when I was sitting down and I'm kind of, working through it, trying to come up with these blocks and again, have it be interesting. And so once I get the general layout of it, I design in Illustrator. So it's an Adobe product. You could use graph paper, whatever you want. But I just kind of just start building it and tweaking it until I'm happy with how it looks. I want it to be a certain size. I want it to be bigger. I want it to be rectangular, because if there's one thing I've learned from Build-A-Quilt is quilters don't like square quilts. Not everybody anyway. And so once it's designed, I use kind of like placeholder colors. I haven't decided the fabric at that point. I just have, blue or gray, or I just drop in any color. Then I start thinking, okay, now what color of fabric am I going to use in this? So it's another big decision. And it's really great. It's really fun to get to design fabric collections and use my own fabrics in there because I can change colors. I have a lot of freedom there. So when I started this, I did actually have a couple screenshots. When I first colored it, I was going to go with green and yellow. I was just kind of digging that taupey kind of color, the springy look to it, but it's going to sound weird. I don't think green really sells. I mean, I think we all like green, Now, my friend Irene gives me a hard time because she loves green, but after doing it, I'm like, I don't know. And I think it would have looked beautiful, but the computer generated just didn't look quite like I was thinking. So I look at the fabric, think it looks good, and look at the computer and think, it doesn't look good. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to just skip that. Let's go with a different color option. And so I was going to do more of like a kind of rainbow color, which, okay, I'm liking this a little bit better. I'm really loving the little triangles in the background. I don't know why that amuses me, but I just was super excited to put that in there. Even though that made the pattern writing process a lot harder, I love the effect. So I kind of hemmed and hawed here for a while, and I decided, I've done a lot of jewel tones, a lot of rainbow. Let's do something different. And this is the only screenshot I took of the other option that was going to be the Lazy Days colorway. So if any of you do build a quilt, that, beautiful pink and green, and I just thought it'd be really pretty. And that almost was the colorway. Like it was kind of like toss up. But then I decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and go with a more floral kind of look, that blue, that pop of that lime green, and kind of really lean into the floral look of it. So when I was designing the quilt or the pattern, I was like, I always want some kind of inspiration, just something to point me in a direction. And Jenny loves gardening. I remember seeing her post, I'm not a stalker or anything, but she's posted on social media that she loves flowers. And we actually, Jessica and I got to drive by her house and see her greenhouse. I got super gardening envy there. So I decided to go with floral themed blocks and fabric. So this was kind of finally, I remember telling Jessica, like, what do you think? I don't know. Jessica's job is to kind of talk me down sometimes or just say, it's fine, just pick one. So anyway, that's kind of the rendering that I had at that point. And I'm like, okay, we're going to go with this. Sometimes it's so hard to make a decision that I get so tired of agonizing it. I'm like, okay, that one, and we're just going to go. So the blocks are all not literal flowers, but just floral-ish. And then, of course, Jenny from Missouri Star Quilt Company, I had to put a star block in the very center. Isn't that cute? So I was super happy with how it turned out. Now, at this point, I feel like I've worked on it forever, but I just have the illustration. I don't have the pattern yet. So now this is where I've got to start, putting words down and making it so other people could actually piece it. So you can kind of see the blocks here real quick. Sorry, I was jumping ahead. So just some different blocks. Again, not literal flowers, but floral-ish, just an inspiration, a hint. And then that center star block right there, which I pieced it. So now I'm super excited. So like if anybody complains about how hard the pattern is, I can be like, hey, I pieced it. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. So once I have the design put together, now it's time to write the pattern. And I'm not going to go into all the nitty gritty with that. But I'm writing it out. I'm trying to figure out the best way to say it. How do I break this up so that it makes sense? It's funny because if you talk to a pattern writer or if you are a pattern writer, there's things that are sometimes easier to write than others. So if you ever read a pattern and you're like, why on earth did they say to do it this way? It was probably easier to write it that way. But I don't know if this is helpful at all, but the program I use for my writing is Scrivener. So if any of you do any writing, blog posts, books, patterns, it's a great program, and I use it for everything. Every challenge has its own Scrivener thing, and you can check it out if you want. It's really cool. So anyway, you can kind of maybe see on the sidebar there, like each block has its own little thing, and I'm just writing out this pattern. It's usually at this point, though, that maybe I have to tweak the design. Maybe I'm like, ooh, it would be a lot easier to write it if I took out this piece. So sometimes it doesn't exactly say the way it started, depending on how it works out. Are you bored yet? I hope you're not bored. So after I've written it all down, just kind of got it down on paper, that's when I'm starting to make the cutting, and that's where the numbers start swirling, and I have to take breaks away from it every once in a while. But then it's time to design it and make it look pretty, right? So it's not just the Scrivener part of it, right? It's also the making it look good and making it, work in that way. And my photos aren't working. Hold on a second. Come on now. Anyway, so I use InDesign, which is another Adobe suite thing to do the design of it. So that's where I'm taking the words and putting it into that pretty design. I'm going to see if I can slap back over here and if it'll kick back on. But anyway, so that's how it looks pretty. But I really want to say, like, I don't have any kind of art degree. this is all just practice, and this is all just, writing block patterns. So if that's something you've ever wanted to try, you just have to kind of go after it and have fun with it. And I don't know why my photos are all locked up, so I can't show you. There wasn't much to show anyway. But so then I go to InDesign, and that's where I make it look pretty. And it, of course, doesn't have to be quite that difficult. But, I think one of my life mottos is if it's not worth overdoing, it's not worth doing. So I've enjoyed kind of getting to work that out. So making the block patterns that each shop hands out, making the finishing instructions, and then the tedious process of, please, God, please don't let me have made a mistake, right? So double checking, rechecking, and lots of fun. So, but then comes the stressful part where it goes to print, right? And you're like, So we're at that point, it has to go to print because, we got to have them to hand out. And at that point, I'm just like praying that everything turns out good. So anyway, I'm sorry, I don't know why it's kind of glitching up there, but that's kind of the process that it goes under. And then I always feel so great when somebody posts a picture of the quilt top because I know that it's worked. And Jessica's over there kind of nodding, yeah, because it's like challenge, build a quilt. I'm like, tell me as soon as somebody posts a picture of their panel with the borders. That way I know they worked. I mean, I know they worked because I tried them, but I just make sure they work for everybody. So that is kind of probably the most stressful part for me is the worrying about mistakes and like, and it happens. It happens. I just always hope it's not a fatal flaw, right? If it's a mistake, hopefully it's not something that like is really, really bad. So again, just a little peek into process. That's like my world right now. And so I'm excited to get this kind of off my plate so I can go back to machine quilting, which I love, and I can go ahead and announce the next challenge. So I'm super excited about that. So it looks like we might have a couple questions. I'll go ahead and answer those. I will be back next Thursday for another live chat. And I haven't decided what I'll talk about yet, but probably something quilting related. Will the thread painting panel be available for purchase online? Yes, I think we'll eventually put it for purchase. I'm imagining, now this is just me spitballing, so don't be emailing yet, but I'm thinking like a little kit, little thread pack that coordinates and then some diagrams that show you how to fill it in. I got to quilt it first so we can see what it looks like, but I'm so excited about it. So I'm glad you like that. Will it be possible to visit the new classroom during the Quilt Walk? No, the building will actually be shut down. So our event space is a couple blocks away from our quilt shop, and it's not right on the downtown. And so we will be doing, though, a celebrating machine quilting event the next day. So if you are in town on Sunday, I can't remember what time it is. It's on my website, but it's like 10 to noon. 2 to 4, I don't know. It's on there. But we're going to be, we'll have the classroom open up then, and I'll be demoing, and we'll have machine quilting, like quilts with inspiration and just kind of a fun time. You do have to register. There's a $10 fee to come, but everybody that comes gets a $10 gift certificate, plus prizes and good food and lots of stuff. So not on Quilt Walk, but the next day if you can swing it. Can you purchase the Quilt Walk pattern online? Yes, we plan on making it available online, but not right away. I have to go through and then take all those 10 block patterns or 12 block patterns and then work them into the regular pattern. It doesn't take too long, but it's just a design thing. But yes, it will eventually be available online. I just got a Freedom presser foot, but haven't tried it yet. Does a presser foot go down while you move the quilt around? So yes, the presser foot might be a little bit of a misleading word. There are, presser feet that could, constrict the fabric and help pull it through. When you're machine quilting, it's going to kind of hover over there. So it's going to be low enough that it, compresses the fabric so you can take a stitch, but not so high that it's skipping stitches. But yeah, it will go down. Are any of the past Quilt Walk patterns available? And Jessica, I love you so much. She just wrote down the answer for me because she knows I can't remember. So yes, we have the Saturday Stroll PDF is available. So that's that one I did in 2 color options. Really kind of fun. And then Town Square, that whole kit is available from last year. Those are the only 2 that are available right now. But yeah, it's kind of fun. I'm excited about that. Do I have any videos on how to bind your quilts? No. Actually, I think I did one for Craftsy at one point because I was kind of laughing with the crew. I'm like, I'm not the person you want to hear this from. I actually can bind, and it's not horrible. I've bound more quilts like the last year probably than I have the previous 10 years. So I could probably do a little video. I did a short little video for our Build a Quilt block of the month a couple years ago, so I can probably find the step outs and do that. Binding is a lot of fun. I'm making Elizabeth Hartman's hedgehog quilt. I'm having a hard time finding a quilt design for the hedgehogs. I've tried the swirl hook and wavy lines. I've hated both. Any questions? Elizabeth Hartman's patterns are amazing. And if you want to see a well-written, well thought out, methodical pattern, hers are where to go. Like, it's amazing how her mind works. I only wish to aspire to that. Those blocks are so intricate and they're so detailed, and they're not super huge. There's not a lot of room of stuff to do. And one thing I really love is how she quilts her patterns. She just does an all over like wood grain. And I think it's really kind of genius. So I think within the hedgehogs, keeping it pretty simple because the piecing is what's going to shine. I like to kind of joke, the easier a quilt is to make, the harder it is to quilt, right? You know, you make one big carpenter star quilt and it goes together really fast, but now you got these blocks that are like 12 inches big. But the inverse is also true. If a quilt is more time intensive, sometimes it's easier to quilt because I just need to echo it or just kind of keep it simple. So while I can't think of off the top of my head a specific design, I would keep it fairly simple within the blocks and just let that beautiful piecing shine. I'll try. I have Irene, my friend, has done a lot of Elizabeth Hartman quilts. I'll have to pick her brain for some pictures and maybe show them next week. So I want to be the kind of person that can make that hedgehog quilt. I see people make them. And I'm like, oh, and I think for a half a second, I want to make that. I know I would never finish it. I would want to finish it, but I wouldn't. But that's just how it is. But isn't that what's great about quilters? We're all different and we can all kind of plug in where we want. Well, I hope all of you have a happy Mother's Day if you're a mom. I hope you have a great weekend with plenty of sewing, even if you're not. And hopefully everybody has beautiful weather and these crazy storms that are happening will stop coming around. I'll see you next week, next Thursday at 3 p.m. Central for the next week's live chat. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.